Hi, and welcome to this video where we'll talk about how you can set up DevOps for your SAP cloud integration with FreeGraph in really short time. We will be covering transport, we'll be covering testing, we'll be covering monitoring, and with a bit of luck, we will also be able to cover Neo to integration suite migration and setting up Gits. But let's see how far we get as a part of this scenario. So I hope you have FreeGraph installed. Otherwise, this video is linked in the description that would show you how to install FreeGraph, how to get it up and running in your Cloud Foundry accounts. You also need to have it connected to one or more integration systems. It is possible to just use one system when you're trying this to see how does it actually behave, what is it, what's good, what's bad, these kind of things. And then, yeah, you need to have an iFlow you can send messages on to try out to see what this can actually do. Good. First thing, we just want to talk about CPI Helper. It is a great tool that just makes your life easier for integration developers. So in your tool, it simplifies the navigation. It makes it easier to create test cases directly from CPI, and you can go in and edit Groovy cases also. I guess that's also one of the things we will be covering here. So let's just see here. So here we have the CPI Helper. We can press synchronize here. This will take us to the FreeGraph tool where we can do synchronization and other actions for this. Just to enable it, we download it, and then we go here to the CPI Helper, and there we add the URL to the installation of FreeGraph that you have. Yes, so that's a CPI Helper. Okay, the transport process, and when we're talking about DevOps, I think this is one of the most important things. Making it easy for customers or users to transport so they do not refrain from using file export, import, transporting things in ways that are not really sustainable, and this is what this is about, making it easy, fast to handle this kind of setup. We want to make it easy for you to transport, and that's the goal of it. So the idea is, probably we need to redraw this one, but the idea is that in FreeGraph you synchronize objects. You can either trigger that via CPI Helper, which will then take this specific version into FreeGraph. You would add it to ticket, you will test this, you will then move it into QA, import it to QA, and then it will configure and deploy it. This is an atomic action performed by the tool. You'll create and configure the iFlow, and then once you press select for import, it will import it. We can move to QA, or production will do the same thing, and then we can finish up the transports. So a landscape in FreeGraph is a way to handle how this flow can be set up. It is the way you would be transporting objects, so you can not skip part of the landscape. You need to use this as a way to handle these scenarios. You can have more landscapes you can have multiple different landscapes in your scenario, so you can have things that splits out if you have multiple different productive systems, different scenarios, different cases, or you have different teams that want to work with different scenarios. It is possible to create multiple different landscapes that would allow one team versus another to do specific actions. The goal is that you transport full iFlows with versions, so it is about transporting all the artifacts that is a part of transport. And then it is also, you can have multiple landscapes, one for support, one for project, depending on how you want to have this. One important thing is you cannot change a landscape once it's been defined. You will have to create a new one and delete the old one. And sometimes it can be a little challenging to actually delete old landscapes because they are still there, and sometimes they make you have transport and tickets as a part of this. Those would obviously need to be cancelled before you can work with that. So be mindful that once you are setting up the landscape, it is for good. You can obviously define new ones, but as a general rule of thumb, there is one landscape that is working on this. We do have the term virtual tenant, and this is one of the really cool things that enables you to reuse the dev system both for dev and for QA. And in that perspective, enables you to have segregate the transport process, having approvals, having all of these different things in that you would actually see in fully blown landscapes, but make it in a simple way. We come with adding prefixes to packages, but you can change it if you want. But as we've seen, it is just the most convenient way to follow this naming conventions. It simplifies the use of copying iflows, and it also enables you to have like a secondary process flow in this virtual tenant. This is one of the great cost savers of the VF tool that enable you to reuse dev system 2 times, and on an integration suite, it really makes a lot of sense. In this video, I'm mostly talking about CPI or cloud integration. The tool works much the same way also for API management. The way you would be transporting this is, it is 2 different transports. So we're creating a transport that transport initial iflow to QA. We'll change the iflow to version 2, move it to QA, and then we can move it to production, and that would be separate transport. So you will be creating different transport. This one you probably will not need to create. You can also update this transport or this ticket to this. So there's different ways to handle these scenarios, and I hope that you will be trying out and see, okay, so what is it? What kind of scenarios do we actually have for these scenarios? Good. We will define a composite landscape, the rules, but let's get started. It is much more fun. So here we have the tool. It comes when we started out, it came with this sample landscape, and we can see if we actually created something on it. Under tickets, we can see that there's no tickets on the landscape. So that means we can go in and we can delete it. Pop up, then it is deleted. We have 2, we also have individual. You don't want to use that. We just have composite landscapes for this. So I have 2 tenants in this setup. I have Cloud Foundry and I have a new, and we'll use the new for production. The tool can transport between these objects, and obviously there could be some differences between the cloud integration of the Cloud Foundry and the new. Probably that was not for this scenario, but let's see. So we'll create one that's called dev. Normally we will just use QA, but because we have done quite a lot of transport on that scenario, we'll use QA demo. You don't want to do that, and then you will create a prod for this. Now we can, so based on this, the tool can see we have 2 transitions, one from dev to this QA demo, and from QA demo to production. We can see the name and description up here. I don't think we can actually change it, or maybe we can. We can define whether or not we want to deploy after production. We can define if we want to do some naming validation. It is a little more complicated to set up naming validation, but you can set up that iflow should have a specific name before they are allowed. You can set up approvals. So let's just say that I need to approve this before here, and then there's different settings. You can restrict access. You can import and create, only the reviewers can import. You can also set up that there should be approval before you start, or make a snapshot before the approval. There can be some, if you're making a lot of changes into the configurations, there could obviously be some things that you need to do in this. Normally this default setting works. Then we can see this parameter mapping rules. Here we are taking all the different artifacts and adding these prefixes to them. So we can see we will add a prefix that is called prefix QA demo. To all the iFlows, we can see here for the iFlows, then we will add a URL prefix that's called QA demo. We have a separate one for queue names. And if we then look at the QA to production, we can see it then removes this prefix. So if you change it in one of them, you also need to change it in the other one. Then we have parameter replacement rules. This is where you can say, okay, I have a value that's called dev xxaa. That will answer QA AA. So you have host names that you can add as a part of this. So you don't need to remember what is the S4 host name in our QA system, and you always forget. With this, you have one simple way of handling these transitions, and obviously then you, on the production one, you will then add from QAA to production AA. We can define if there's artifacts we don't want to be migrated, if we want to set up restrictions, we have tags, etc. So there's different ways you can reject scenarios for it, and we also have webhooks, so you can create events. If, for instance, you have imported into production, then you would update the Jira ticket using a CPI flow that will update Jira with that specific information. But let's keep it with this. We will get through this and you'll check, oh, is everything okay? That is okay. So now we have set up this landscape, and that means one of the first things we want to do is we want to go to this landscape overview here. Here we can see what has been deployed in the last month to see if there's any differences in here. Another cool feature is we can use this one, where you would be able to see, are there any differences between our dev and our productive system. We have not synchronized all objects, and that's why we don't see too many things. So let me just also synchronize objects. So you will go here, you will press synchronize all packages, and this will take a little while for it to download all the packages if you have a large cloud integration system. And we'll do the same thing for the new system. But that was what we needed to set up the landscape. We have the rules for transport, we have the parameters rewrites. So here we're adding dev, QA, or S4 hosts as a part of this. Landscape, it is an integrated, we had that before. We had different ways, and especially if you wanted to use PI transport, we could also integrate with CTS+. We don't really see now that CTS+ or Charm or any other tool will actually add a lot of value to the transport process, and especially for CPI objects, because it is really difficult to actually see what is being transported in those scenarios. And I will show you what transports will look like. We have a reviewer, and as you saw, I added myself as a reviewer. But one of the problems is that, I don't have other people to help me approving here, so I will just say here individual use. No, that's not use individual landscapes by default. We have one here that is transport creator can create their own, or can approve their own transport. Not really the ideal for productive usage, but to show the transport and approval process, it does make sense to set this up. But ideally you would have, when you have set this up, and if you do not have this flag, even though I'm in the approval list, I would not be able to approve my own transport, and this is what you ideally want to have to be able to transport artifacts. Good. Let's get started with a transport, because then it's much easier. Webhooks we talked about. There's also APIs for this if you want to invoke these APIs from different systems. Let's see how transport works. So now the synchronization is finished. I will also just go into the new and synchronize that one. It will take a little while before we would need it. But let's go here to the dev system. Here we have an iFlow that's called get customer. So it is called get customer orders to something like this. So here it is really easy to search for content. Customers to. So here we have the iFlow configuration. It is not the real iFlow, and obviously it is a lot easier if you just go here. You can link between these. You can go to the package and down again. But if you click here, we can open this iFlow. And here it is, a simple iFlow. We have an HTTP sender channel that we would be using here. Let's just create a new version of this. So we have here the last header. We will add today's date in 23, save as version, and deploy it. Good. So now we have this as a version. Since we have CPI Helper in, one of the things we can do is we can press synchronize here. This will then trigger this message and trigger us to synchronize it in FIGAF. We could also just press a full synchronization, but that sometimes can take a little longer time. Now it just takes 3 seconds. So we can see now we have 2 revisions of this, and this is one of the power of FIGAF. We can compare these objects. We can see who made changes to them. So we can see here where was something changed. It's this area here that was changed. We can see the place in this that was changed, and this just makes it so much easier to do troubleshooting of your scenarios. We also have a number of other ones. We have div to HTML that would show you what are the different message map or different areas that has been changed as a part of this. And here, if you have done other changes, you would see a lot of problems with the BPM model, and that's why we have the graphical div of the model, because then it's a lot easier to get started with it. We can also do a mapping comparison. If we have message mapping, they would be shown here as different subjects. Okay, we've made this change. We want to transport it into production. So to do that, we will select it here. We'll assign to ticket. We will create a new ticket demo course. We will select our landscape. We'll select this, the dev to the QA demo version. We will add our Jira incident tracking number. You can add any number in here, but the idea is that we want somehow to externalize who have requested this, because the tool is not supposed to be for business developers. It is more based on the actual events that is going on here. So we can see we need a license for it. We'll request a license for it. Good. So now we have the object here. We can create test cases. We'll go through that later. But the idea is here, if you have test cases, you can look up the test cases and use them as a part of this transport process. Now I'll just click on transport, start the transport. This will figure out what is it that we actually need, and found out, hey, we actually need to have this package in also. And it added it. When you are here on the tracked object, you can also go in here and say attach on the dependent object. This will go in and figure out, hey, you're actually using this script collection. Let me add that also to this transport. And that way you make sure that you have all the relevant objects that is a part of this transport. Okay, so we can go back to the transport. There's this transport overview that just gives you a good idea about what is the direction of these. Good. So let's see here. We have this the system. We can see here we have HANA Dev, and let me just so we can obviously go in here and manually override here and say QA value in this API key. So this is just the externalized properties of the iFlow. But if we want to remember that we do not want to do HANA Dev transport each time. We will just go here, we will add HANA Dev to HANA QA demo, and then we will do the same thing for to prod. That way it will be submitted all the way through. When you are making changes to the transport, there is some of the things that you cannot change while you have active transports. So you'll get a warning saying you have these 3 transports that are active. If you then want to avoid them, you can go in and cancel these transport or import them, and that would then enable you to work with these, update these missing fields. So if we look at this parameter report here, we can now see that hey, I found this value, I did search replace for it, and now I am good. So no need to remember these values for it, and obviously you do the same thing for host names. If you, for instance, have a password here you want to see, you will get a warning saying, hey, this security artifact is not found on the target system. It will just be a warning. You can import it, but obviously it's not really ideal if it is something that is used for these scenarios. Good. As the other thing I have, I also have this parameters report. This is really helpful if you have larger transport. So the idea here is that you open this. You can see all the name of the iFlows that will be in production, and then you can see the old and the new value. Where you can see if some of these attributes has been changed, some other things that is going on between these two systems. And with this, you then have the ability you can make a modification in this one. So if you wanted to, you can actually just make modifications in this, and then upload it into using this batch import. It's a little more advanced, and you obviously need to make sure that it is saved with the correct brackets, etc. So it's a part of the configuration to ensure everything works smoothly. As a developer, I can also go in here and see what the differences are. So for now, there's not a lot of difference because this object does not exist already in the target system. I can send it to approval, and now as an approver, I can go in and say, did Daniel actually do these scenarios? So it's not there. So they for configurations, if there were objects, you need to see it in here. I can approve it or reject it. If I decline it, it will go back, and the developer can then go in and fix this issue. Or I can just say, hey, that's good. Just press approve. I guess if you have some things you need to do, you can add that. Now we have a transport that's ready to import. I'll just say import here. And now we can see that this iFlow has been imported. The import takes a few seconds to complete. And we can now see if we open the package here, we'll get into CPI. We can see that the package has been prefixed with QA. We can see that the name is QA demo here. If we look at this sender channel here, we can see it has also been prefixed. That means that we actually can send messages to it. We do not need to externalize these endpoints. They will all just be getting this QA demo prefix for it. And if we look at the configuration here, let's see, is it under the API key? So we can see the API key and the SAP system. Both of these has been updated as a part of this transport. So let's close it. Good. So now we will do our testing in QA, and we'll see if everything is correct. Once we are done, we can move it into production just by clicking here the next ticket. Move to prod. We can give a different description if we want to. one of the cool things here, if we have this transport overview, that will show you the full transport that is where this is a part of. So you get the full back and forth link between these systems. So when you just have 3 systems, it's not really a big deal. But when you get 3, 4, or 5 systems, it becomes a lot more complicated to manage these scenarios. So we will then start a new transport. So we are now going to move from QA to production. And let's see here, there is a possibility that this iFlow already exists in our target system. And we can see there's a lot of differences between these ones. Some of them make sense, others does not really make sense. But for now, we do not have approval on. If you look at the externalized parameters here, one of the things we can see is that they have all been switched to inherit from source, from target. That means we have found the iFlow. As you can see here, it's already in production. And it says, it's probably better I use the value that's already configured. If you want to use the one you have from demo, you will select it here, press save. And now we can see it will then change it from this to prod, HANA prod. So we have all of that as a part of this validation. And we can see what the difference of what's the new and old value. We should obviously have approval on here, but now we don't really have that, so no need to validate these things here in this demo. But it is the same validation that you will be doing between these 2 systems. Now it's been imported successfully. Okay. One of the things that often then happens is that you somehow get back to this the original iFlow. This probably here, no, and want to do a change of it. Then you have different ways to. So we'll just save it as a new version, 208. And we will need to synchronize. So it took 30 seconds. We can see it's 208 now. We have 2 options now. We can either create just a new transport assigned to a new ticket, or we can go in and we can take the ticket that we had here from the beginning to select it. We can switch it back to development. We can select it and we can say update to latest version. So now it is 208. That's a part of this. We can then start the transport. And now we can transport 208 into QA. Oh, didn't I approved it and import it. And once this has been done, we can then create a new ticket in. Then what you'll see is a more complicated flow here with more tickets. So there is either you create new tickets or you just update these tickets. Or if you, for instance, have a project go live, it is maybe easier just to say, okay, I will take all of this new package. So you can go here into the QA. You can select the, for instance, here you can go to the QA package. You can then assign to a ticket. Move to prod. Now we just have one iFlow in it. You'll select it here. And then in it, you will then attach all the dependent objects. Then all of the objects inside of this object will be assigned to this. And you can see it's also adding the script collections, value mappings, etc. for this scenario. And we can start the transport. So there's different ways to do transport, and it all depends on how you want to go around and how your transport and approval process is for these scenarios. Good. So that was the transport process. I hope you can see how easy it is to get started setting up these scenarios. We do have something also about managing more complex scenarios. And projects, you have 6 months project you want to support. Some would be using 2 transport flows to move it into production. Or you can have one that just moves from dev directly to production, depending on how you set up these scenarios. I think the default standard approach is to so we have a version here that is in production. We start a project, that's 102, and moved here. We get a project to fix this version here. We roll back this dev version to this, fix it, move it into production, roll back, apply our changes manually. So there's no automatic changes. So obviously, if you use Git, you may be able to do something, but for the BPMN model, not so much. That is just going to be too complicated. And then you'll just merge the changes, move that into the QA, and start testing with those scenarios. We do have this transport overview, as you saw, that gives you a good idea about the different levels of configurations that you have. Yeah. You can have multiple landscapes. Source. We also support a Git repository showing you what can actually be there, and there's the BPM comparison that also gives you a good view. One of the other aspects of this is obviously testing, and testing is important. And the more you can push to the developer testing, the better, because if we as developer can test, it means that it becomes a lot easier for us to see what does the impact of this change have, instead of having to go to a business guy and ask, can you test this? I don't know what I have done, if it is correct or not, and they have no clue about what this process actually does, and you end up wasting a lot of time. You will still need to do business tests, but at least this will give you a good understanding of how to get started with these things. So obviously you should have an iFlow that you can help, and there is a couple of different ways that we can work with this. So we use the record replay, which is that we expect when we send a message that we would expect to be creating this test case, and then we can actually run it. So let's see here what we have here. So we have this package here, go and search for it. Here we have a proxy that allows you to use HTTP to process direct, and there's also HTTP to GMS. You need to deploy these two to be able to test those scenarios. Yeah, why do you create it? Record replay. The most you can also take messages from the productive system if allowed and not sensitive and stuff like that, and use those as test cases. Yeah, there is different ways that you can create test cases in. So let me just show you a couple of those. So the easiest one is that we have our iFlow here. We will switch it into trace mode. And okay, so here we have an iFlow. We have triggered it. We can see it somehow fails here with this JSON conversion here, JSON to XML conversion. And I guess the problem is if I look here and check the body, it looks like it is getting JSON mapping. So anyway, that's fine. We can then click here on the FIGAF. This will take us to FIGAF. We can create a new test case, demo CP get faster. We have specified the process here. We can also fetch future or historic messages. Notice they need obviously to be created with trace mode, and you need to process these within the half an hour you have access to these things. So now we have a test case. It has 1 inbound and 11 outgoing messages. That means that all of the different steps that is a part of this, we can then see where these are processed. We can see here we got the branch split and stuff like that. So that's all good. Now I can go in and create this as a test case. We can say where we want to run it. we will get a license for it. And when you are doing this, be sure to select your landscape here on the scenario. That means that if you're creating test cases both on the dev and QA system, they will still count as one. Otherwise, they will count as two iflows when you're creating test cases. We can now select it and we can run it. I think this will actually trigger to run on both systems. Maybe not ideal, but let's see. And what you can then do is you can go here to the last test result. Here we can see it ran both on the Neo and the Cloud Foundry. We have the More button here. We can view the test case. And view the results. So I'll just view the result here. We can see it has some failures. And if we look at this diff here, we can see that there is a new element that has been added, which seems like a timestamp. To ignore element, we just click on it, which seems like a broad scenario. We can also see there was an expire header. We don't need that one. We can also ignore it. And if I do I can then compare again. Process skip successful only. So now we process 3 messages. So there are still some problems with these. We can see that has been ignored. There is still this diff header. Maybe I did not add it. So now we can see everything is successful. We have a good test case that we can use to do this. We can also check messages polling. We can see here what was processed, what are the different messages that is a part of this setup to handle these scenarios. There is also other options, like we can go in here in the test configuration. We can say exclude certain errors we do not want to attend. We can also go in and say use mock endpoints. This would, instead of calling the real endpoint, just call a fake endpoint that we have defined. And with that, we can get in information about these different scenarios. Okay. And yeah, we are getting some message failed here, but that is, I guess, expected because the iflow originally failed. We can also get a warning here saying, hey, there you had the design time version is 208, but the deployed runtime. And this is obviously something that you need to worry about when you're doing testing. And also when you're transporting these things, you will also get these kind of information about what is actually going on. We can also create a test case in a different way. So the ease is just to synchronize here. We can see we have this iflow here. We can say create test case. And the way I would normally do it, just add it to the one I already have. I just want to run it on Cloud Foundry. We can then say where we want to fetch this input and output message. So the way I would normally do it is I have one input message. And let me just see if I can find an XML message. Let's CSV report. And the output is also this. For the target, it can sometimes be really difficult to find the right output branch that we will receive. And obviously in this case we will not, because the payload is just wrong. But the idea with this is that you will be able to send a message in. And once we then run it, an easy way to open it is to use this click here. Then we'll get into the iflow and you can see what is going on with this scenario. And hopefully I did not add the mocking services. So if we look at messages here, we can see here it was processed by this, and here it fails all the way here, probably because it is not XML. But that was really not what we wanted to do. What we can see here is that we actually then created a new flow with expected messages, and we can then go in and we can say, hey, let's update that and create that as a new test case. So now we have created a new test case. Let's just go here to the message or the test case information. Here we can say CSV upload. We can go in here and say that what is the expected payload at this int state here, edit message. So here we're getting all of this as a text file. Let's just remove 2 lines. We can go into edit here, remove 2 lines. Just to check what actually we can see. So you can edit here, you can edit the headers as a part of this. We can try to run it again. And if we then open the results, we would expect to get some errors during the comparison. If it does not trigger the processing, you can also pull messages here. These are compared successfully. Something was not received, which was this one here. Maybe something has changed. So we did not receive this message, so we can maybe pull again. Skipped, because it's already pulled. So there's something we definitely need to check for this scenario, and it is easier for things that actually works. Okay, so now we have created test cases in 2 ways. Either we have just used a trace to work it, or we have uploaded a message, used that as a way to update our test case to ensure that it is what we wanted to do. We just need to create a new version here of it. 209, deploy, and we'll also just synchronize it. What I wanted now to is the best way is obviously to have test cases that integrate everything, and you have then you are reusing the test cases when you're creating transport. So transport with test. Transport with test. It is also in the QA landscape. So we still have the object here. When we are looking at the test cases, then we can select these 2 test cases that we already created, and now means that they will be assigned to our system. We can say we want to run it on our CI dev system, and that means that we can then use this as a way to continuously update our test cases, and before we do any changes or transport, we know we have a test case that is valid, and there is something that's going on here. We can have last report date, these kind of things on it. View results. So it has been completed. There is some unfinished messages on it. One of them is successful and one is unfinished. This is a good way to document what you have done, and this is what ties the DevOps to an integrated testing part. And then the idea is obviously go in here to the view result and say, okay, maybe we'll not receive that one, so we just go in and we update the test case based on this. So next time we run it, we will actually get a successful test case. So we can go back, run again on our dev system. And this is just a continuous process of creating test cases and make sure they're valid, because if you do not have test cases that are valid, people start to ignore them, and then you get up with something that is not really applicable. And that means in a few minutes we can then start the transport here. And then here on the transport result, we will hopefully at some point in time then see that it is either success or failed, depending on what we have. And that means that as an approver, I get a lot more information about what did the developer actually do. Did they create the test cases that were won? And obviously I can always go in here and check, this is successful or not successful. So now we can see we have testing result that was successful, which makes it a lot easier for me to approve this. But obviously we do not have, well, we have from time to time different validation rules, but this is also up to the architect to approve these things and say whether or not it is okay to bypass these scenarios. Okay. Maybe that was enough on the testing part. Create test case, run them, shared configurations. So let's just take this one. So the idea is that you have this these two test suites and test runs here. So we have the test run for these two scenarios. They both have some test cases. So we have the default and we have the one 3-build default uploaded one. The thing we want to do is maybe we want to do mocking of just one of these scenarios. So we can go in here and create a service, a shared configuration here. So we can say get customer mock, and here we can select which test case we want to do. So we can just select it based on the test case. So we'll select this one. It is for cloud integration, and here we can then go in and say, hey, mock this test case, and that means that once we've run this test suite, it will use the mocking service. And the mocking is, so let's see it here. So here we have it, and we can then run it on the CI system. And the mocking is about when we're sending out external messages, we will send it to FIGAF instead of sending them to the real system. And this would allow you to, for instance, check the full end-to-end processing of your SAP-based integration. So this one would run successfully. This one here we can see here it is using this comparison configuration. We can see here it's executed on an iFlow that is called set FIGAF or FIGAF mock. And if we look at this endpoint here, we can see that the details here that it is calling this BTP service instead, getting the payloads that is expected at this specific point in time, and this makes it really easy to understand what is being processed and see the flow of the messages that we are getting afterwards in it. When you do that, you will get some different headers that you need to ignore, and you just say ignore all. And now we have a scenario where we can process comparison again, and we can go in and say, okay, so this is what we would expect for this scenario. So that was how easy it is to set up test cases, run them, use them as a part of your transport, and I think that is obviously the best way to have it. That it is an integrated part of the process, because yeah, when you have the test cases, if I get this and want to see what is this iFlow actually doing, I can use my test cases and try to understand how does this actually behave. Good. Invoking mocking service, so it uses Cloud Connector if you have the tool installed on premise. If you have it in BTP, no need to do anything about it. We do have nested loops, so if you have a splitter and inside of that you have another splitter, if it's just one camel multicast and one splitter, everything works fine. But if you have two multicast inside each other, you can use the FIGAF multicast index as a way where you can add these variables. It's used in sometimes. You can also check attachments, and obviously sometimes this can be challenging if you have multiple loops that are processing, creating attachment, and you also need to consider, is attachment testing important for this scenario? Yeah, trying to transport it. Good. So let's talk about monitoring of cloud integration, CPI, what the tool can actually do. Because that's also a part of the process, and for you to understand what is the system doing. We have a number of different instruments that allow you to check this. So we have a latency monitor that gives you information about what is actually being processed. So to enable this, you will get something like this. On Neo, you can get these two ones. On the other ones is only for Cloud Foundry. But to enable this, you go into check monitoring here. So on the agent, we have a number of settings to check for monitoring. One is we enable the monitoring. We enable this message, this one, and enable git. That should be okay. This will then each 5 minutes do a polling to start figure out what the system is doing and start building up this this test suite. It will take a little while for it, so we will go back to that. We also have the statistics, and this was the one we just enabled inside of here with this enable message statistics. Where we can get a PO-like scenario for handling messages. We also have a monitoring capability. This would allow you to actually understand what the system is doing below the surface, making it easier to access these things. And this would also allow you to, for instance, give finance access to some of the finance interfaces and allow you to drill down. Here you can create some tiles, and let's create one tile for this, and here you will see the monitor of this, but it's easier to see. So we will go to the CPI message monitoring here. We will go into edit mode. We will create one here that's called error. We can select what statuses we want. Let's just take the error and abandon it. We can select the period for this. We can have, if we want to have other query parameters or custom statuses, we can add it. We can go in and say like that it's only these 3 iflows that's relevant for this. But now let's just take it for all. So save it. So now we can see we are getting a number of here. We'll just switch it into on debug mode, and we can see this messages that has been processed of it. If you, for instance, have something, you can say here create record messages, and a message that's been created in test mode, that would allow you to actually create a test, or a trace mode, that will allow you to create a test case without using CPI Helper for a specific payload. Good. Let's open it again. So here we have the different objects. We can see here the payloads that has been here. This one would show you. Let's see if we have some of these that shows us persist messages. So here you'll be able to see persist message, data store, and MPL attachment all in one view. You can navigate to the iflows in FigAff and see what's the name of this this iflow, and navigate further. So there's a lot of ways that makes it easier to monitor. One thing I also like is this CSV export here. So this is one that gives you a good overview. We have extracted all of these receiver parameters, sender, receiver. So one place where you got access to all the data that you would need as a business owner to understand what's going on. Good. Let's see if we got something here on the, not any messages yet. So let's take this support tool. Alerting, this is about being able to inform you when something happens and create specific alerts for the specific cases that you have. Then based on this, you have a monitor. You can see all the alerts. You can trigger specific alerts that you want to call, and you can also send messages to the users that is involved with these scenarios. We do have a restart process. You can see it here. It is not ideal. It was one thing that we used when you did not have the MPL queues, but the idea is that you create one script that first up here you save the data in the context, and once you have the message failed, you will send it down here, save the payloads here as an MPL attachment. That means that once the FigAff tool processes it, it will then be able to say, aha, I can send this in, and the FigAff tool will then handle these processing scenarios. You can also set up emails, so you can get email notifications on these scenarios. Good. But let's set it up. So the idea here is you go here to manage consumers. we will select this agent here. We'll call it failed. We want to enable this crowing job that will then poll every number of minutes. We need to select it first time, and then we'll just say poll now. Then we'll get all the different alerts that has been processed in a short period of time. In this query, you can also add more complex scenarios to check extra elements that you want to see, or that's a important part of your landscape setup. So we got some alerts here that were found. So we can see here what are the messages. So we're getting something here that's something about a file template that is happening. Error writing this file template. We can also see here that this was the main message that failed. So we can write description how we are fixing it. We can create a ticket to start transporting these objects again into production. And more importantly, we can go in and we can say, okay, well, let's create a new one here. This is called file. What's the error here? So in this XML is the payload that we have from it. We have the original payload, camel file description, and then we have a simplified one where it removes some of these parameters because they would always change. So we try to remove as many parameters as possible from this. Once we say here, it will just come up with this is probably the alert that we want to be checking for. And you obviously need to be careful with this setup about what you are querying with. So the idea is you change the XPath. You can write how to fix it. You can then do a test to see if it worked. We need a step number. So the idea is that you will start. The tool will start with the lowest step number, and then it will just go up all the way until end 999. And here it will then have the default. You can set up with the handle. Is it critical? Are there any file systems? How long time do we want to mute these messages? We can test. So this does not match the payload. See now it works. We can extract content from here, from the payloads. We can send it to an email, so just put in an email address if you have added the email notifications. Email notifications will also be sent if you're requested to approve certain transports. Let's just say save. So now we have started creating new rules for these scenarios. So next time we will fetch this, we will then be able to see, we actually know how to fix it, and it will be linked to this this new rule that we have created. So the idea is obviously you need to go through around this and figure out what are the problems, eliminate them, fix them to ensure they do not arise again. Let's see if the statistics here has been updated. Not yet. Daily, hourly. Not a lot of messages yet. Let's see if actually I've got it. So here we can see that something has happened. We can see some of the alerting statistics here for the last hour. We can see iflow latency, monitoring status, message processed, and long-running process. The idea with this one was to see, are there any long-running process that we want to have information about that we can actually use? So yeah, this can take a little while for it to update. Let me just see if I forgot it. It should be this one that we needed for this. But it looks just like the PI's message monitoring log, and it's just scheduled. You can group by it. And the idea is once you have the data here, you can then go directly into this, drill down into this iflow and see the payloads that is missing here. In the support tool here, you also have on this, you can create a new consumer where you're looking at strategies, some like one of the long-running processes that you have more than 10 long-running processes per support interval. That this would be a way to give you more relevant alert about new things that is actually happening. Talking about alerts, there is also enable landscape detection. This is really a useful one. So here you can say, give Daniel an email. This will enable us to check. It will go into the CPI one. So if you go here to an agent, you can go in here and you can then see here show version history. Every 6 hours or something like that, we'll check what's the CPI versions, and you will be able to get an email notification if the CPI version has changed. Okay. The last thing I wanted to cover was one of the things is here we have a Groovy script. One of the challenges with Groovy, it is really difficult to develop. So the normal would be to go into edit mode, try to make some modifications to it, check it to see if it works, and then deploy it. We have made it easier. So in FIGAF, we need to enable this, and to do that we go into the agent, we select here agent, enable IDE. This is really one of the best features if you're doing a lot of Groovy development. Let's just try to restart it. And I'm sure you will love this. This is what we can do now is we can say we want to take this payload here. We can then select this is the test case that we want. So that means we have this input. We can run it and we can see what is actually producing here. So if we're just making some changes to this, run it, compare, we can see where there was a change in this between what we expected and send. And obviously this is the same when we're changing these attributes here. We can also see them in the property, so we can see this property down here. So this makes it really easy to work with Groovy script XSLTs, and what the idea is, you will work on these scenarios, fix them. Once you have done the completed new values, you just click on upload. This will take this, upload it into the CPI. And that means that if I now press refresh here, we should be able to see this new value that we have been added here. Then we need to edit the iFlow and save it and activate it, and synchronize it back. So here we can see we get our new values back, and this just simplifies the process, making it a lot easier for us to edit a Groovy script. It works the same way for XSLT. So one of the really neat features that we have as part of this. I'll not cover the name. There's a Neo to Cloud Foundry that's using the same kind of transport process. So yeah, you will create two landscapes, one from Neo to Cloud Foundry, one from in the new Cloud Foundry environment. What you can then do is you can select a number of iFlows, create custom mapping, and that would allow you to customize these mapping rules between these two systems with script collections, etc. And that means that once you move it into the new landscape, everything will be set up using this new way of handling things. Maybe just shortly, it's a lot larger complexity around this. So yeah, as you're probably the reason why you're watching this, you wanted to make it easy to do DevOps. That is what we do with the FIGAF tool, giving you an easy way to handle the DevOps together with the SAP integration suite, with testing, with transport, all of these different things. But there is cases where you want to do Git, and this is to speed up some of the development work. So we do have this Groovy editor and XSLT editor, but sometimes they are not enough if you need to work on complex logic. You can then decide whether or not that is sufficient to work on such scenarios, or where you want to work with those scenarios. It also gives you a way to debug, but it is speed up development, versioning. There is also a part of documentation as a part of this. So the way the Git process works is we have the CPI, we synchronize this to FICAF. So each time we press synchronize, it will then upload the Git repository. The user's IDE can then pull this. We have some plugins that allow you to update the IDE, or you can commit back to the Git repository. But there's no transport or no way to move the data up to the Git repository or CPI. We only recommend that you commit, for instance, configuration, documents, etc. There's some Gradle plugins that allow you to work faster, upload, download integration. You will create a Git repository, get some tokens, fill in this data into here, and then it will auto-populate the Git repository with all the data. We actually do have a new feature also. I think a lot of this would be automated, that you can make a checkbox in the agent configuration. So when you're in here in the enable Git integration, you also have scenario documentation. That iFlow scenario documentation will be added to the Git repository. So I do see the Git as a place to do a lot of extra validations. We have integrated with pipelines, so you can create some pipelines that's triggered each time FICAF updates these iFlows, and then you can use that to handle specific scenarios. But yeah, setting up the Git is much more complicated, and that's why we have our own editor where you can simple code it, but for pro developers, you probably want to use the IntelliJ, because there you can also reuse some of the test cases that you have and create it. So I guess that was just the only thing we wanted to see here. So if you have a test case here, you can go here to the messages. Here you can say generate Groovy script, add it to the Git repository, and then in the Git repository it will reuse these test cases that you have here in your Git repository. I hope this is what you are looking for. So a simple end-to-end solution that enables you to monitor your SAP integration, to see everything that's going on in the landscape, and understanding what is the most important things about these things. Here. So now we have the data. We can drill into this one. We'll just create a simple filter here. And now we have the data here. So I hope you liked it. Thanks for watching. Please hit the like. Please share it with the team members that need to get onboarded with the FICAF tool to deliver integrations faster. Thank you.